So today you read those excerpts from Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett. For next week, your first essays are due. I believe I went over them last week. I'm going to look over another sheet with you all today, a footnoting and style sheet that I give to my classes. And then we can start the discussion. So let me move over there. So where are we? We're already module 5. We're moving along quickly, everybody. Footnoting a style sheet. So there are your paper directions. If I do student view, you see it says submit assignment. Please submit there tomorrow, next week, at the end of the day, I believe. So you have till 11:59. I'll send a reminder next week, but we will be having class next week. You won't have a reading assignment. We'll just have a discussion to cover whatever lingering topics we have to take up, okay? I went over these last week. Before I dive into footnoting and style points, anybody have any general questions about the papers? Anybody? Well, I can stick around after class if anybody wants to chat for a little bit, okay? So footnoting and style sheet. The kinds of things you need to be footnoting in this class, by the way, as I indicated to you, when you are going to quote and you're going to reference your sources, I've asked that you footnote. You will not be doing in-text citations. You'll be footnoting your sources, which means literally creating a note in the footer of the page. I'll get into that in just a second. Certain things you need to footnote. Obviously, when you're using somebody else's, I'm looking over here, things you need to footnote. When you're using somebody else's words, obviously, but also figure, statistics, data. If you want to, if that should make it into your papers for whatever reason, you better footnote it, as well as diagrams. Reported facts or events that are not common knowledge. That's something that also should be uncommon knowledge. Uncommon facts that are not widely known, that should be footnoted as well. Here's a website a link for a website to help you footnote a variety of sources, any that I don't indicate here, but I do talk about a couple, how to footnote a book is edited. Again, for these first papers, I expect you'll write exclusively about the text in question. This is mostly going forward, where you will be slowly, you will be expanding the roster of sources you use, especially for the final research paper. But I want this available to you now, just in case you footnote any different sources for whatever reason. An essay in a journal, article, poem, or play, how to footnote an article in a newspaper, how to footnote non-printed media, online sources. Okay. Part 3, how to create a footnote in MS Word or Google Docs. I imagine many of you guys will be using Google Docs. Any other platforms out there you're going to use? Could know about.
I'm a Word fan, just because I grew up learning that, but.
Okay. Any others? I don't particularly care. I've asked that you save them as a PDF. I only ask because I know that like most students writing Google Docs or MS Word, and the creating a footnote option is pretty similar in both. My understanding is I use MS Word. I don't use Google Docs, but in MS Word, and anybody tell me if this is not the case for Google Docs, but MS Word simply go, you write your quote. At the end of the quote, you go to the top, leave your cursor where it is, go to the toolbar at the top, click on insert, and then footnote, and then the cursor is automatically dropped to the bottom of the page, and you type in your bibliographical information. Here I wrote a sample essay right here about Machiavelli, and then with some footnotes. And you see what this looks like? Look, see that line and the quotes under the footnote, the bibliographical information? MS Word does that for you automatically, okay? And again, as I indicated previously, you don't need to give all the bibliographical information for every footnote. You only give it for the first. For subsequent footnotes from the same source, you may abbreviate. Just give the author, title, page. How to footnote multiple sources at once. It's very simple. Students often get this wrong. Sometimes they'll add several footnotes at the end of a quote, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't do that. You just do a single footnote. And then when you list your sources in the footnote, you simply put a semicolon between them. If you have any questions, and I gave an example. Let's see, I wrote something here. An example, research has indicated that reintroducing wolves to Yellowstone Park, blah, blah. Footnote 5 at the bottom. Here we go. Here we go. Yep. See, bang, semicolon. This, again, if this pertains to you and you have a question, reach out to me. How to format large footnotes. Okay, there is a special kind of formatting for large footnotes, everyone. By a large footnote, that is, sorry, for a large quote, I'm sorry, there's a special footnote, there's a special formatting for large quotes. For a quote of 4 lines or more, this is what you do here. This is it in the middle of the page. In the middle of, I wrote a little paragraph and I had the quote there in the middle of the paragraph. The pioneers pushed into the Indian village, blah, blah, blah. Can somebody tell me, anybody tell me, what do you notice about that quote, about the formatting of a large quote?
It has its own paragraph.
Basically, it's like a little block, right?
I also don't see quotation marks anywhere.
No, wacky, huh?
Very. I don't like that.
Don't like it? Sorry, tough. That's your language. Deal with it. That's right. When you do a large quote, you do not use quotation marks. You set it apart like a little paragraph within a paragraph. What else do you guys notice about it?
I mean the colon, sorry. The colon at the end, I mean before the paragraph starts.
Yeah, that's helpful. Sunny, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I believe all the lines are indented 1 whole unit. I think 1 whole inch.
Yeah, it's actually tab to double indent. See how your paragraph has 1 tab? These quote, a large quote gets 2 tabs. All right. That's all. Then footnote like usual. I see there's some comments. I can't really read them right now. So if you have a question, just go ahead and ask. Back to a stylistic issue. Introduce your quotes, guys. Don't just drop a quote. Tell me who says it. Set it up. How to indicate various titles. Okay, listen. When you mention a book title, like Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett, it's not enough to just capitalize it. You must underline or italicize. There are some other titles you should underline or italicize. A newspaper title, a magazine title, a movie title. When you want to quote Mall Cop, you must have an underline or italicize. All right. All right. Articles from newspapers, magazines, journals, and internet. Chapters, poems, plays, these get quotation marks. All right. Anybody have any questions out in the interweb?
So I'm using the William James book. When I'm citing it, should I cite the version that I have or the one from the library?
Cite the version you have. That's fine.
Thanks.
Other questions? Anybody else? All right. All right, good. So, okay. So, oh, I guess I'll leave the chat up there so I can keep an eye on what you all are doing. All right. Any last questions at this point? General questions about papers or footnoting or whatever? that you want to ask? All right. Okay, fine. Like I said, I can make myself available for a little bit after class. And if you want to have a proper conversation, email me. We can set something up on Zoom. It's very easy. Okay. Good. Everything else okay otherwise, guys? Keeping warm? Managing not to freeze out there? All right, good. So today we're going to talk about Dennett. Last week we talked about Richard Dawkins. I think we covered everything in Dawkins that I wanted to cover. I don't think there were any loose ends. I wanted to share something with you that was related to, I guess, our conversation last week. So let me just get this for you all here. I have some, I told you last week, you know, I'd like to discuss with you all some Gallup polls about, you know, the state of belief. And here is one. This is for your, I'm putting them in the chat for your own reference, but I'm going to pull them up in a second so we can take a look together. Okay. So if you're interested for keeping those sources, that's your thing. Okay. So I guess I wanted to start here. Gallup, for those of you guys who don't know, is a pretty reputable polling website. They do a lot of politics, of course, but then they also poll people on a lot of different social issues, cultural issues. And here's an article from 2019. They polled people, Americans, about belief in evolution. Which of the following statements come closest to your views on the origin and development of human beings? 1, human beings have developed over millions of years from less advanced forms of life, but God guided this process. 2, human beings have developed over millions of years from less advanced forms of life, but God had no part in the process. 3, God created human beings pretty much in their present form at one time within the last 10,000 years or so. And if you can see the color coding there, it indicates, you know, how the percentage of each has changed over time. And the gray one here, God created man in present form, that looks to be the portion that does not believe in evolution. And so that's how they came to their headline that 40% of Americans do not believe in evolution. Comments? Questions? Thoughts?
So they feel as though 4 out of 10 people do not believe in evolution, just in general in the US. Like if you were to grab a random 10 people, 4 of them would not believe in evolution.
Yeah.
When was this done?
2019.
What?
I mean, I will say I grew up in like a kind of rural like it was like there were horses there, but it wasn't like middle of bumfuck nowhere. But like at my school, my little sibling was in class and got in trouble for saying evolution wasn't a theory. Or like because like they said that evolution was a fact. And the teacher was like, well, we don't know that.
Yeah.
And got into like trouble for saying that kind of thing. And that was like in, I don't know, like 2008, 2009.
Just up the road here from Baltimore is York County, PA. So about 45 minutes away. There was a legal issue here about 10 years ago where a school board, one of the local school boards was going to teach intelligent design in their science curriculum alongside evolution. So, you know, that's not far from this urban center, you know. I see there's a bunch of stuff in the comments, but again, when I share, I'm not able to see them. So just feel free to speak up, guys.
Yeah, fun fact. This is Rebecca. I live in York County.
Oh, you do where?
So do I.
I have a feeling, in New Freedom,
Oh my God, yeah.
that makes sense that would be the district where it's controversial
It was Dover.
Dover. Oh, yeah. My brother lives like right outside of Dover. Yeah, that area is, I mean, most of York County is just a little bit, I don't even know.
It's very much a mixed bag of of if people are chill or not.
I just like to tell people at Micah about this because it's so close by. You know, people, when you're in the Micah bubble, you think, oh, it's out there, but it's not.
Rebecca, my grandma lives in New Freedom.
Oh yeah, I'm in Hanover, but New Freedom is like 15 minutes from here. Like I drive through it all the time.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's actually how I get to Baltimore is usually like through New Freedom.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's right up the road, everybody. Anybody else? Anybody else want to weigh in? Any questions? Anybody viewing this skeptically?
I mean, I think you kind of have to ask how old the people who are being polled is also.
I gave you the link. So if you scroll down, you can see if there's demographics, take a look and see. I'm going to share with you the other one too. This is a little bit older. This is from 2016, about belief in God and other entities. For each of the following items I'm going to read you, please tell me whether it is something you believe in, something you're not sure about, or something you don't believe in. 79% believe in God, 72% believe in angels, 71% in heaven, 64% in hell, 61% in the devil. So here we've summed it up. 40% of Americans do not believe in evolution, and 60% believe in hell. And I would love to hear international students weigh in. It's always more interesting when the international students are here in Baltimore and they're like, they believe what around here, right around me? They believe what? That often comes up when we talk about guns. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments, observations, feelings?
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry.
I'm an international student, and I have a question. Are they only focused on Christianity or Catholic?
This doesn't distinguish. This is just general belief in God.
Because in the other survey you just showed us, I think they didn't really include people with other religions like pantheism or polytheism.
Well, it was only that. You mean the one about evolution? That just is about believing in evolution per se. I mean, I don't think you need to,
Yeah, because when I come here, it feels so different. It's like everyone is believe in one God.
Well, the different sects, is that Raven? Yeah. The different sects have different positions, of course. So if you look at, evolution, I told you last week, the Catholic Church accepts it, but there are many evangelical churches that do not. To my knowledge, Judaism accepts it. I don't actually know where Islam stands on the issue of evolution, but I haven't heard that when you hear about disputes with evolution, it tends to be fundamentalist Christians.
So I looked at like the survey methods on both links.
Yeah.
So on the first one, it says that it was 1,015 adults aged 18 and older, which is a big range. I mean,
Hey, man, I don't know much about the science of polling, and there are a lot of people skeptical about it, but that Gallup should be good. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. I totally understand. But, also the sample size is kind of small. It's not like the smallest sample size, but it is kind of small. In the second link, it says from 2016, 1,025 adults aged 18 and older.
Mhm.
So again, that is a big range. And it doesn't mention whether it's like mostly like the older generation or mostly like the closer to the 18 to 20, you know what I mean?
Mm.
I'm not like full on just ragging on this, and I'm sure that this still holds up quite a bit. I'm just, I'm squinting a little bit, just a little bit.
Good. That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
I would love to see I know this probably will never happen, but like 10 or 15 more of these with like double the polling pool from random places in the country, because I feel like that'll give a better a better, more concrete sample. Also, I just noticed somebody had their hand raised and I talked before them. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think Sunny brought up a good point in the chat where about how like they're talking specifically about like human evolution, and it's something of my mom. It's like she believes in evolution, but not when it comes to humans. She's like, there's no way we came from like gorillas, and so it's like I think that's something that there's a bit more nuance there when we talk about evolution specifically with humans.
Excellent. Thank you. Rebecca, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't necessarily maybe fully buy into the data, but at the same time, I totally think that it could be true, like and accurate. I don't know if it's because I grew up around a lot of conservatives and like a lot of fundamentalist Christians, but like I think there's a lot more people that believe in this than somebody who might be living in a more atheist bubble might think. Like there's a concerning amount of people who still buy into this, and like I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, but like when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't let me learn about anything besides creationism. Like and I think there's a lot of people that grew up like kind of taught that.
Thank you. Alex?
I just wanted to add on to that, just kind of the whole bubble idea, because like we kind of learned that we are in a bubble with this past election. We were like, oh, Biden's going to win in a landslide. And then it was like basically half and half. So it's like, just because we aren't like exposed to that life doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So it's like, it's pretty probable that that's a pretty accurate poll.
Gotcha. I share your suspicions. Chris?
Yeah, I think Alex said what I was thinking exactly, where it's like, like a lot of us, probably grew up in some sort of like suburbs or near some sort of like very blue area. But like the reality of the United States is like it's a huge place, and you have like a lot of these places that are like very rural or like, very like traditional or conservative in that sense. That's like, it's not really that hard to believe that this many people still believe, that God created humans exactly as we are.
Gotcha. Aiden?
Hi, I just wanted to give an alternative perspective. I grew up in the middle of New York City, and yeah, I never really realized there were that many religious people in the world until I went to college. Just because, it was, there's of course churches on like everywhere in New York and synagogues, but there's just, it's either you're the crazy person on the street trying to like hand out Bibles to people, or you're, like you keep it to yourself. Is kind of like the perspective I grew up with religion.
Right. Anybody else? Yes, Irish.
Because I grew up in Philippines, and so when I came here, I didn't really think that like Americans are religious. Because in Philippines, I grew up going to to public school, but every Tuesday or something, like once a week, some catechists would come to school and then teach about the Bible and everything. But then I also, like in my science, like they also teach about evolution. So I had both. and there wasn't like, it wasn't a big deal. I don't know why, but it's interesting how like here, like the creationist and the evolutionist is like a big deal.
Good. Thank you, Sunny.
Oh, this is just a small thing, but if you look at the poll again, it's interesting how when asked about heaven and hell, the same people tend to believe more in the positive things like angels and heaven. Yeah, it seems like the same reason that like religion attracts religious people, you know, the fact of like the idea of life after death attracts them. And for people who don't want to believe, the idea of death again after death, like, is not attractive to them, I guess. Maybe.
Good point. That's true. I noticed that too. I don't know. I mean, I am religious and I'm a little weirded out by all these people who believe in the devil. Of course, I watched The Exorcist again the other night, and boy, I'm not good for horror movies. Really, I'm not. So talk about belief. Then it talks about belief in belief. I can't believe, I will myself into not believing in the devil because I just can't deal. I just can't deal. But I wanted to do something. Thank you for, I'm going to use what you just did there, Sunny, as a segue. We're going to get real existential today, guys. Okay. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. Maybe. I doubt it. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about death. That's all. You know, I think if you really want to try to understand the urgency and the appeal of religion, which is what Dennett talks about, you need to talk about death. So I'm gonna divide us up into breakout rooms here, and I have a couple questions I'm gonna put here in the chat. Okay, so I'm gonna break you up. And these questions are imprecise, and I can't do anything about it. Just do your best. You know, you can pull them apart on your own. What do you think of the idea of heaven? Do you hope there is one? What do you hope to see after you die? Okay, these are your questions for your breakouts. I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes, and then I want to see what everybody has to say. Okay, so see ya. And I'll put it in all of your rooms. Okay. Tobias, Jesus. Gia, hello. Heyo, you with us?
Oh, hello.
Hi. Go to your room there. I put you in breakout rooms. Can you go to the rooms, to your group?
Sorry,
Cool.
I'm just now getting the notification.
It's okay.
That Christians would, or I guess some Christians would have you believe. Especially because, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's like, there is, one of the reasons that hell as a concept exists is because of a translation of the Bible in the Old Testament, where they're talking about like what happens to you when you do bad things, and they're like, oh, you're gonna go to Gehenna, and people are like, oh, Gehenna. There's like a, oh hey, Sherman.
I'm just listening. Talk. Ignore me.
Oh my goodness. I was just gonna say that they like, if there is like that most normal people I've met, it's kind of like that intimidating, like, what's it called? Like incomprehensibility of it. Like that if we're able to feel that in your normal life, could you imagine if there's like something that, like, if we get disconnected from like the actual state we're in, what would that feel like? And Noah, I know that there may have been some not what's it called? I don't know, hallucination.
I feel like you come back at some point, you know.
What if you commit a
how
sin
I-
in heaven?
Huh?
What if you commit a sin in heaven?
Then you go somewhere else.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like, you know, the Greek mythology, like they go to like Elysium or like through different places after they die.
Else or some other creatures, and
Yeah.
just continue to living in other forms.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think many people in Asia believe in this kind of.
That's like a normal
form.
thing.
Yeah, it's a normal
Yeah.
thing in different religions like Buddhism or others.
Yeah, totally.
Like you die and then you can go to like you have another chance to live again, and it's like
Hi, guys.
Hello.
I launched a poll. I made a poll. Hi, everybody. While you were talking, I made a poll, my first one ever. I'm pretty proud of it.
What if both of the answers are right?
Jesus, you guys are confusing.
What if we want something that's not on this?
Make your own poll, damn it.
Well, I went Margaritaville.
Listen, that could count as heaven.
Margaritaville.
Hey, we could go
There is
back
the
to-
development. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
We could go back to like week 3 where to reach this higher power, we need to get drunk. So I'm with you.
There is
I don't think I've ever actually had a
neighborhood
margarita.
being
Fun
built
story.
in Florida called Margaritaville. It's a Jimmy Buffett inspired neighborhood for real outside Orlando. So where all the parrot heads can hang out.
So what you're saying is go there.
That.
Listen, this class is just Furman telling us to go feral for Jesus.
Heaven isn't a place on earth. Explain Margaritaville.
Let's see the poll.
How are margaritas?
I
don't know if we actually have tequila at
They're
the house.
good. Margaritas are top tier.
Here's the thing. I don't like the taste of most alcohol is the thing. I like my drinks as fruity as me, and that is it.
Well, you could get alcohol. You could get a alcohol drink with no alcohol.
I could, but
And it's
then
not
what's
alcoholic.
the point?
Yeah, it's not alcohol. This is juice.
I think what you need is like a good mix and a good tequila. Like if you have shitty tequila, your drink's gonna taste like shit. But if you have a good tequila, it's gonna be good.
All right, guys, this is for your Discord channel. Come on now. I can't, this is recorded. I'm going to put this on YouTube. I can't have you talking about tequila.
I mean, you could if you weren't a
I lose
coward.
my job, everybody. Come on now. All right, back to heaven and hell. So can you all see the poll? Only one person wishes for blackout. Everybody else is interested in heaven and reincarnation. That's interesting. Okay. What did you all learn in your conversations? Anybody want to weigh in?
I feel like there's a difference between what we hope for and what we believe in. At least for me, I'm going to speak for myself here. There's a difference between what I, hope for, what I believe in. Like, it would be really nice to be reincarnated, but I don't necessarily know if consciousness lives on in any real way, any like physical, like tangible, corporeal way. Maybe in your perception, like the way you perceive your own existence, sure, I guess. And like maybe since perception is everything in terms of how we like experience the world, maybe that has internal meaning, but yeah.
Thank you. Arthur.
Brittany brought up this really interesting point about like the concept of like, if there is like heaven and hell and all that, like of it existing on the same plane, just in like different like layers of reality. And I thought that was cool and kind of made me think of like our discussion a few weeks ago. And like
Wait, what does that mean?
Oh, like we still all are like on Earth essentially, but like just in some existences, like heaven is one of them, and like angels hang out there, and like we see demons in another, kind of like ghosts,
like the realms of heaven and hell, for lack of a better phrase, exist on the same like plane as us, just in different realms. So like ghosts through the tortured souls who couldn't make it to heaven, and so they're angry and they're suffering and they torment people, but there are good spirits too, and so it's kind of like they all exist here, just like in parallel realms. So like everybody exists on the same earth, just adjacent to one another.
God, so hell is quarantine, basically. That's what you're saying.
And it made me think about our like discussion about like mystic experiences and like those people who claim like they understood the universe or like felt, that presence of like just kind of the idea of that like one of those realms kind of overlapping with ours for a sec or like something like that.
Gotcha. Rebecca.
Yeah, Freya was bringing up a good point in our group, thinking about heaven, and coming from a background that wasn't based in Christianity. And we were kind of talking about how a lot of people believe that hell will manifest itself as like your worst fears. But she was saying that like heaven would be whatever you believe it to be, basically, like whatever you think would be ideal. And I've never heard that interpretation before. I only ever hear people saying like, well, when you go to hell, like they're going to torture you with whatever you hate the most. But I thought it was like a really good, like positive way to look at the afterlife.
Awesome. Interesting. Natan.
So in like the Jewish culture, there's like many like theories about like heaven and hell, and for most part, heaven is well, I think we'll can talk. What Becca says just like the best, like wherever you want it to be. And for hell, it's very like confusing because like some people believe in it and some people like don't, and like the people who believe in it like, oh, it's not really hell, it's just like your soul is in this fire until it gets cleansed, then you could go back to heaven. And yeah, for me, I don't really believe in reincarnation. Mostly I said this in my group because I rather not get reborn, just take me out. But yeah.
Wait, so did you vote for the blackout? Are you the guy?
No, I voted for heaven.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah,
I need to
blackout
talk,
scares
whoever
me.
voted for blackout, I need to hear from that person too.
Blackout scares me. I like sleeping, but I like having like my thoughts. I don't like,
Gotcha. Chris.
Yeah, in my group, I was discussing how like just like the notion of an afterlife at all is kind of like a comforting thing to like distract from like the idea of nothingness. Like like once your body is done for, it's just in the ground, like that's it. And it's like like that's not a very satisfying conclusion for a lot of people. So this idea of nothingness, but also like I feel like for me at least, heaven doesn't feel like a permanent state. And so like when I saw your poll, I was like confused because I was like, I didn't know when to choose between heaven and reincarnation because I don't think they're separate.
Hey, I welcome, really, I honestly welcome anybody come up with their own poll because that was, I'd like to see what your options are. I, as a believer, I'm in a weird position. I don't really like the idea of heaven or hell. I don't believe in hell at all, actually. When it comes to heaven, I don't like it because of this issue of eternity. What the fuck am I going to do? My wife says to me, oh, when you die, you'll see your family and friends. I'm like, you know what? My mother drives me nuts after 10 minutes. How am I supposed to spend eternity with her? Okay. Brittany?
I was talking to my group about this, and I play a game in which you get to visit heaven, but it's Norse heaven. So you visit Valhalla, and they basically just relive the same day over and over again. Like, it's a good day by Norse standards, but like they wake up and they eat breakfast in this giant banquet hall and they drink mead and then they go to battle and they die and they do it all again the next day. Yes, Natan, it's Assassin's Creed. But so like doing that for one day, if you're a Norseman, like sounds pretty fucking dope. Like that's a Norse warrior's dream, but doing it every day for the rest of your life, like I guess if you don't remember the previous day, then like cool. But that just seems like if I had to relive the same day over and over again for all of eternity, I would like find a way to commit die in heaven.
Well, on that note, I really have to pitch the movie Groundhog Day. If you haven't seen it, Groundhog Day is actually a really, really profound story. I mean, I used to show that in my intro to philosophy classes because I thought it was really so interesting. If you haven't seen it, do watch it and if you have seen it, watch it sober and pay attention. It's really, really interesting movie. That script is quite brilliant. Okay, Rebecca, yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe this, but I guess this is maybe like a possible counterpoint to the fear of eternity thing. I know a lot of like, again, especially the fundamentalists, believe that heaven is eternity, but because there's no sin and because there's no concept of like good or bad and you're just like always happy, it won't affect you that it's eternal. And you'll just like do whatever. Like I think as a little kid, I would imagine heaven is like everything's perfect, so you just go like play the piano every day or something. But I don't think I agree with that. It's just strange to think that people would imagine eternity being fine because they would feel fine about it because everything would be perfect.
Excellent. Great point. That gives me a lot to think about. Arthur mentions The Good Place. So many people have told me to watch that. I haven't gotten around to it. Sin, you won't sin in heaven. And so it'll make the idea of eternity acceptable or palatable. My first question is why, but you sit on that and think on that for a second, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, not exactly a smart thought, but like all this kind of just reminded me of like this one, like I think it was a tweet where it's like, like if you can't leave heaven, does that just make it like a fancy prison? And it's like, how is that any different from hell? Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's kind of, you read my mind, Chris. That's kind of the way I thought about it. For those of you who was it, Brittany was talking about, the idea of hell being on this earth.
Yes.
Shout out Huis Clos by Sartre. Whoops, stupid spell check. Huis clos in French means no, well, yes, translated as no exit. For those who haven't read it, where Sartre's famous existentialist play, where hell is others, which I don't agree with, but it's about people trapped in a room for eternity, and that is hell. Gia.
So the concept that was mentioned earlier where like heaven would be a place where there is no sinning, and then it wouldn't feel eternal because everything would be fine. I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like for something to be good, there has to be duality in it. Like for you to be able to experience good things, you have to have the bad to compare, and vice versa. For things to be bad, you have to have a good. So if you were in this like state where everything was always good because no one could sin or there was no evil, how could it be more bearable? You wouldn't know that it was good.
Well, I'm putting this in the chat. Presumably, if there's no sin, there will be no more desire. And desire is the future-looking emotion, right? Seneca, the ancient Stoic, has a beautiful essay about desire. He writes an essay about how time, on the shortness of time, on the shortness of life, and about how time moves quickly. And he says that that we bring this upon ourselves because we're always living for the future. We're always looking to desire. So if you would eradicate desire, that would eradicate your time consciousness in a way. So that, I guess in that respect, you're not looking to a future. But I haven't really thought about it. I'm just throwing that out there. Zach.
Oh, I actually don't have anything to say right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
No worries. Were you the blackout person?
No. I was reincarnation.
Do you think the blackout person might like to say a word? Come out of the shadows. Oh, there's two. Who are you people? You don't need to be ashamed. I mean, I don't have any good options for myself, like I like the idea. I guess I prefer the idea of reincarnation myself because I just find heaven boring. So I'd rather be reborn, but then are you going to be reborn for eternity also? In Hinduism, they have the idea of moksha, that you will be released after so many lives. So it's going to happen regardless. Eternity is a long time. You're going to have a long time to run through those lives and then just sit there. Blackout might not be such an awful option. Socrates said, he was condemned to death, and they said, how do you feel about that? He says, well, I'm not scared about death. And he said, one of the reasons I'm not scared about death, he says, it's one of few options. Either I go to heaven and I get to talk to people for eternity, which is what Socrates liked to do, or B, it's just a blackout and I'm asleep. So screw you. I don't care what death is, and the jury just got madder. Zach?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that like being reincarnated for infinity is kind of seen as like a hell in like Buddhism, I believe, and like
that is
yeah,
accurate.
Yeah. So and that like the release from the karmic cycle also, that like that's kind of like the eternal state, because you're like, it's kind of exactly what we're talking about, that just like existence is pain is like one of the other doctrines, right?
Yeah, in Hinduism, the idea is that it is punishment. It's not damnation. Hell is typically, in the Christian setting, is eternal damnation, and there's no rehabilitation, technically speaking. In the karmic model of Hinduism and Buddhism, you are punished for a lifetime, but then you can improve your lot as you go along. Gia.
Haven't certain people who like have died and then come back or like been resuscitated, haven't they like said that like there is no afterlife and that all they saw was darkness and like nothingness?
Mm-hmm.
So like that's one of the reasons why I chose blackout, because I
hey,
thought,
there's
hey,
a person, everybody.
I thought about it, and I thought that like if like scientifically people have died and then they've come back to been resuscitated and come back to life, and they've said that they didn't experience anything at all and they were even able to come back to life, then it can't be reincarnation. And they can't be in another state unless that they were, I guess, were pulled back from it, but I don't believe that either.
Yeah, there's actually a documentary on Netflix. I didn't watch it, but I saw the trailer about people with near-death experiences and also experiences of reincarnation. Like they quote a boy who said that I was a sailor in a previous life. So maybe Friday night I'll drag my wife and we'll watch it. Chris.
I mean, here's where I have my issue, because like, okay, so hell is a point of eternal damnation, but God is supposed to be a loving and forgiving God. So why can't he forgive, like, like give that like restorative, like forgiveness to those in hell? Like, why are they, subjected to that forever with no like redemption? And yeah, I think Rebecca also brings it up in the chat as well.
Well, I mean, you read my mind, Chris. That's what I think. I don't think hell is consistent with the gospel. On the other hand, how do you feel about Jeffrey Epstein? And certain people who there are Are there certain people that are beyond redemption? I don't, those are hard cases. Okay, I seem to have stumped people. It's okay.
Sorry, that's why right, the death penalty isn't as satisfying as it should be.
Exactly.
For evil people.
Exactly. I've made that point myself. I agree with you completely. Natan?
This could be like very like spiritual and religious, what I'm about to say, but like,
well, this is a class on religion, so it's
this is where it belongs. A lot of people say like, oh yeah, if hell isn't real, and I was taught like we can't judge people because we have that moral mind. If that makes we see him as humanly as possible in our human. If that makes sense. I know everyone's like, yeah, he's fucked up. Does that
does it sound like, are you sympathetic to the saying, don't live in glass houses, or what is it? He who throws the first stone, that kind of a thing? Don't judge because humans are imperfect.
Something like that. But since we're talking about heaven and hell, and it's so otherworldly, it's hard to one more chance, hard to relate. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Finn.
No, I think I hear what Natan's saying, just with judgment, we can't help but impart our human biases. So even if we see someone who is so despicable, it's obvious, oh, they're gonna party in hell. It's well, what the hell does that even look like? What does death even look like? So it's just there's just so many layers of subjectivity you have to add to it. So yeah, I see how that's bizarre, because it's yeah, you'd like to think Epstein is in hell, but it's oh God, who knows?
Right. You might be all psyched to get to heaven, and then you'll be surprised who you find there, right? Rebecca.
Yeah, just along those lines, that's what I was kind of thinking of, is a lot of Christians believe that whoever we might think would go to heaven or hell might not necessarily go to those places, because since they believe that God is perfect, obviously his judgment is totally impartial. And it's what you were saying, those different kind of phrases that people throw around. A lot of people also say only God can judge me, because they think that he has the authority to do that. And there's also people who believe that all sin is the same, so that lying to somebody about something is the same sin as murdering someone. And there's Bible verses that say that, if you hate your brother, you've murdered him in your heart. So there are people who might say that yeah, even if you've done egregious, terrible crimes, God could still forgive you, because he forgave me for lying to my parents about something. You know what I mean? I don't like that logic at all, but I know that's a thing people believe and would probably use as a counter to be well, yeah, of course God's going to decide who goes to heaven and who doesn't. But it still doesn't line up to me with the fact that he's supposed to be all forgiving. So I don't know.
The passage you're quoting is in the Gospel of Matthew, and Jesus says, he's arguing with the Pharisees, and he says to the Pharisees, he says, you are, you're basically saying that the rich, for example, who are greedy, if they give a penny, then they're going to heaven. And Jesus says, it's not the deeds that damn you or save you, it's the intentions. So then he talks about this widow who has no money and gives a penny. He says that she has given more. The point is that, it's easy for us to judge. As humans, we can only judge actions, right? And so we see actions, but that's an impartial view, right? A more complete view are people's intentions. So that's why Jesus says, he who commits, it's more important what you believe and what you think and what you aim to do than what you actually end up doing. They're at least the same. So, you know, right. Anyway, Natan, go ahead.
Just gonna throw this out that it's like it was a small tidbit. So it was also a meme, so take it with a grain of salt. It was actually really like mind-boggling. So imagine there's a war going on with two Christian armies, and they both pray to God to defeat their enemies. So I was like, it's a meme because it's like a picture of God, like what? Who did I do? But if like you think about it, like it's like all about perspective, like oh, but they're both praying to asking for help from the same God to destroy a fellow, I'm gonna say Christian in this example, but yeah, it's just like something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see Brittany's comment there. In my opinion, it doesn't matter that you didn't mean to hurt somebody. It matters that you did. Well, if you did, then there is a shortcoming in intent anyway. That's the point, right? So it still comes down to intent. Intent is the most important thing here.
Road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right. Oh, wait, does that make my case or hurt it? I don't know. I was going to give the example when I teach ethics. I give an example of actually Jeffrey Dahmer. I mentioned him. You all know him, right? Serial killer. Like, you know, if you're walking in the park and you see Jeffrey Dahmer being chased by the police, and you better watch out. And like a baby carriage comes flying down the hill and Jeffrey Dahmer happens to save the baby carriage, you know, just like throws it out of the way. Did he do a good deed? And moral philosophers fight about that. Because on one hand, yeah, I guess he did, but he certainly didn't mean to. So it's not praiseworthy. So, I've caused some trouble now, Brittany.
Even if he didn't mean it, number one, but he did do it. So like that's the intent versus impact thing. He didn't intend to save the baby carriage, but he did. Okay. But if I saw him running down the street and I saw him save the baby carriage and the police were chasing him, I'd still trip his ass. Like it doesn't matter to me. He did
the baby first.
Yeah, you know, if he saved the baby first, great. I'd still trip him. I don't care.
Aiden, thank you.
Not to like complicate the situation further, but have you read the book My Friend Dahmer?
Oh God, no.
Okay, well,
I like sleeping. Sorry.
Well, it's a story. It's a graphic novel on the perspective of Jeffrey Dahmer's high school friend, or like not really friend, but one of the only people that really like was in his circle during his high school years. And it really makes you sympathetic for Jeffrey Dahmer in this weird way that like you don't want to be. But at the same time, it's like you can tell that this was a very troubled individual who struggled with his urge to kill people like his entire life. Like he was basically drunk his entire high school experience, like as a way to resist his urge to hurt people or things. Like, and it makes you like, how much of it is his fault? Like, because if he was born this way, like, is it really his fault how horrible he was if he resisted his urges as long as he possibly could?
Good. And I mean, to relate to what we were talking about earlier, you know, and this is a rhetorical question. I'm not asking, is he in heaven or hell? Okay. Or neither. Maybe he gets the blackout. Finn.
Oh, I was going to say, I have an instinctual reaction. Like when I see people pulled over on the side of the road, or if I see anyone being pursued by the police, my first thought is like, Godspeed, comrade.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm very ACAB about it. I'm like, man, viva la society, whatever. But I was going to say, I don't know about the whole, like, I mean, I think that you can't obviously paint anyone in shades of black and white. So even if Dahmer was fighting whatever was inside of him, like, it's like, no offense, but I've had dark thoughts. I'm like, I mean, everyone has those thoughts, like I could push my friend off this building. But no offense, y'all, I've never done that. You know, so I'm just saying, like, I think that if Jeffrey's like, do I want to I mean, I listened to this whole thing about him the other day because I've been on like a murder mystery dive, and I'm just like, ugh, no sympathy. But like, I'm like, no offense, I've been depressed. I've never done that. I know people that have struggled with like massive inner demons and have never, ever considered hurting someone else because of it. And so I think that there is something to be said about that. I understand that it's like maybe urges that we could not fathom existed inside of him, but I think that's just giving him too much damn credit. Like at the end of the day, he had urges somewhere in his soul to rape and murder people. And it's like I think that it is fair to say that that does not exist in everyone. And he did not, like, just because if he has theoretically thought it off, it still doesn't change the fact that he did what he did so many times. And he was a young man. He wasn't like an old man. So it's like, I don't know. I just don't have sympathy for that kind of thing. I mean, I can understand it, but I don't have sympathy.
Yeah, I mean, and let me just say, and we'll see what Chris has to say, but let me just say, like you know, because I have taught about the death penalty many times, and now the death penalty has really gone on its way out. So a lot of this discussion is overlaps. You know, you can punish someone without issuing judgment on their eternal soul. You know, you can still find reason to, you know, there's a variety of reasons for punishment that doesn't necessarily condemn or implicate or judge a person, you know. Chris.
Yeah, so relating like this whole conversation back to the reading. Yeah, at the bottom of 285, I think Dennett actually, you know, sort of goes into this a bit, where he's like, you know, we used to regard drunks as somewhat diminished in their responsibility for their actions. They were too drunk to know what they were doing after all. But now we see them and the bartenders who serve them as fully responsible. And, you know, I think that is like a good metaphor for this sort of thing when we talk about like morality and like, you know, how much willpower someone has. But also like, I mean, think about like the position that Jeffrey Dahmer had, like, you know, in terms of like, you know, his race, you know, the fact that he's a man and all that. And like, you know, when we absolve him of this, like when we talk about like battles and stuff like that, I think Finn made a good point where it's like, you know, I know a lot of people with like who fight demons and stuff who don't do that. And I feel sort of like, I guess in a way infantilizing in a way to talk about him like that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't prepared for all this conversation about Dahmer. I feel a little weird doing it. I'm going to try and get off the Dahmer talk. I mean, you all are welcome to continue, but let me just say one thing in relation to what Chris said. You know, I think today we increasingly believe more in individual responsibility. You know, I think so. I'm thinking, maybe because I saw The Exorcist, but I'm thinking like in earlier times, Christianity, for example, there was always a belief, well, you could be swayed by the devil, but it doesn't matter. You're still going to be damned. You know, even though it's not your fault, you can be damned anyway. Okay, that stinks. Interestingly, now today we have, I think, better understanding and appreciate individual culpability more. But anyway, that's just a thought I had. Oh yes, Rebecca.
Yeah, this is making me, I'm like looking back on my notes and it's making me think about what Dennett said about morality. And he was talking about how like the more we modernize, like the more choices we end up having. And
Yeah.
I think that is kind of related to like the individual morality stuff. Like he said basically that you can't really determine morality by a single authority just because you believe in that single authority, and that it's just like you have to think about what you should be doing to help solve problems because there's so much that you can do now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a really interesting point, actually. That was on page 293, where he asked the question: is it harder to be moral today? And actually, why don't we turn there? I thought that was such a great quote. 293. Is it harder? It isn't being this top of the page. It isn't easy being moral, and it seems to be getting harder and harder these days. And then he goes on below to talk about the role of technology here. And he says, thanks to technology, next paragraph, what almost anybody can do has been multiplied 1,000-fold. But our moral understanding about what we ought to do hasn't kept pace. You can have a test tube baby or take a morning after pill. You can satisfy your sexual urges. You can copy your favorite music. You can keep your money in secret offshore accounts. You can also help people, right? It seems that technology has multiplied our options, has complicated our moral lives, and technology, but at the same time, technology has made it easier to do good, right? He says at the bottom, now with the click of a mouse, you can provide medical care for AIDS sufferers in Africa, You can use the internet to organize citizen monitoring of environmental hazards. But of course, his complaint is that religion, because we're still in the dark ages with regard to religion, that is why we have not improved morally, even though the means to do so are right there. Anything else you want to say about that, Rebecca?
I don't think so. It's much to think about.
I didn't know if you had a question or if I just kind of went off. I do not know what's going on in the chat. Okay. So anyway, I guess we could talk. I mean, there were two. Let's dive into Dennett. There were two major discussions. You and Rebecca and Chris have quoted the second part, which has to do with morality. We took that up a little bit last week with Dawkins. So I don't know if you guys want to dive in deeper with that. I was going to look at the first part, but I can do that in a second. I mean, essentially, in this chapter on morality, he says that, similar argument, he says, page 279, he said, religious defenders, one of their big claims in defense of religion is that we need religion to be moral. And he says that this is not true, A, and B, it is demeaning. Why is it demeaning? This idea that morality requires religion, why is it demeaning? Chris?
Yeah, so I guess it's demeaning because it assumes that without religion, then humans just wouldn't have a sense of wrong or right at all. It's sort of this thing as if though naturally we need religion to tame us and hold us down, as opposed to just natural human thought of well, this is okay and this is not.
Not only that, Chris, the idea that has a longer pedigree is that that humans are so corrupt and easily tempted that we need, but not beagles, they're good at heart, but humans are so corrupt at heart that we need the punishment of hell. We need the prospect of heaven. That has been the view for a long time. Whether that is the case anymore, I don't know, but that was the long argument for many centuries, right? If you don't hold out the option of eternal damnation and the goal of eternal salvation, you can't really get people to behave. Rebecca.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I know Dennett talks about how religion uses the carrot and stick strategy. And I think the reason that it's so demeaning is because it acts like every human is still a little baby that needs like candy in front of them to do something right. And it seems like an idea that has phased out somewhat, but there's still so many people that believe that. And I also think the reason that religion shouldn't necessarily dictate morality is that it imposes things that are immoral onto people that aren't actually immoral, and tries to like use guilt and shame to control people out of things that are like completely harmless. And that's like the area of Christianity where I always have the biggest issues. Like, obviously, a lot of fundamentalists are super homophobic because they think that like your sexuality is inherently immoral if you're not doing it the way they want. But there's no, secular reason to oppose that. So I feel like that is like the other part of religious morals that I'm not crazy about, and I find just like doesn't give human beings enough credit.
Yeah. Yeah, I dropped a quote in the chat there. Religion gives a license to kill, he says, page 285. That was an argument that we saw in Dawkins, that religion, too often gets wrapped up in violence. It's appealed to. It's used as justification for violence. You're talking about, I dropped that. I mentioned that quote there before you started to talk about homosexuality. So it seemed a little bit out of place, Rebecca. But I guess your other point is that religious morality, for whatever reason, is highly rigid. I mean, that's another question. I don't really have a section in this class devoted to it, but Freud raises the issue. I mean, why does religion always get wrapped up in religion, in matters of sex? So my dad, here's a confession for you all. My dad was a priest. Actually Irish, he was a priest in the Philippines. And he said what he hated in Baguio, what he hated the most was going to confession, because he would just listen to people talk about their sexual desires. Yes, I've had enough. And he left, of course, the priesthood. That's why I'm here. But his complaint and his generation, his complaint is, why? I mean, as you said, Rebecca, there's absolutely nothing in the gospel about homosexuality. It's not a mention. I mean, there is a complaint about it in the book of Leviticus, but that's the Old Testament. There's a complaint about a lot of other things. It's stretching it, to say the least. By the way, I noticed in the chat, some people went to Catholic school. The Catholic Church's prohibition on homosexuality does not come out of the gospel. It comes out of natural law theory, Thomas Aquinas, okay? So a totally different thing. So it's actually a really interesting philosophical question for me. Why does religion so often get wrapped up in issues of sexuality? Because if you look at so many foundational texts, it's not there. In Buddhism, in the Buddhist sermons, which you'll read in the Upanishads, I can't think of any prohibition on sexuality of any kind. The Old Testament, you see mention of adultery and you see brief mention of sodomy. But at the very least, it's matched by all kinds of other strange prohibitions. It's hard. There's no consistency, is what I'm saying. So it's a very interesting question. I have my theories and I'd be happy to share them, but I'm going to see what everybody else has to say first. Rebecca, did you have your hand up again?
Oh, no, I actually just left it up. Oops.
Okay. Aiden, you have the floor.
I don't know about like philosophically why, but like it makes me think of a class I took on ancient religions and how at the time of the rise of Christianity, there was also, pretty sex positive community going on in Greek and Roman culture, you know, where like there was not a lot of shame around it, especially when it came to, you know, like as well as like pagan beliefs and same-sex relationships. Like there was not, like I think a lot of the, you know, regulating the relationships people had, you know, came from rejecting other religions, you know, as a way to like shame them or like bring people toward Christianity. Like it was a tactic at first.
There are many, you know, as with any, thank you, Aiden. As with any religion, you know, there are different interests that take charge at a certain point and shape it to the way it is. And I taught a book about 2 years ago, a book about St. Paul. And St. Paul, who writes the letters at the end of the New Testament, he's considered to be the person who shaped Christianity as we know it. Nobody knows what Jesus intended. I mean, the Gospels were written hundreds of years after he died, so we don't really know. St. Paul gets his hands on that, and then he shapes the thing. St. Paul says in his letters at a point, he says, you know, when you are baptized, you are neither Roman nor Jew, rich nor poor, man nor woman. Gender doesn't matter, it's clear. In the book on St. Paul, which is written by Karen Armstrong, if anybody's interested, I'd be happy to share it with you. It's very readable. She points out that you're right, Aiden, that the ancient Greeks, this was not an issue for them. Plato and Socrates had gay lovers. It's the Romans. The Romans were famously chauvinistic, and they got their hands on St. Paul, and they transformed this in such a way that they were not going to be tolerant of anything. If Plato had gotten his hands on it, it would have looked very different, is the point. So, but my point to you is, I guess the argument is simple enough that, you know, it's cultural views that determine at the end of the day these views on sexuality, and then the culture gets hands on the religion as well, you know. But, you know, I don't know. I'm just babbling here. Sorry, guys. I have to think up my thoughts some more on this. Anybody else want to weigh in on sexuality and religion? There's some very interesting research projects that could come out of that if you're interested. But yeah, I mean, my view, Rebecca, is, I mean, that, yeah, there are very pressing issues, you know, and how central is our sexual conduct or sexual disposition? How central is that to our moral character, you know? If we're violent, isn't that worse? Surely that's worse, right? Arthur?
I think it's like hard to talk about like how sexuality shapes us when, at least like for LGBT, when it comes to LGBT folks, because like so much of that is based on like so much history of like oppression, and like a lot of gay people end up like leaning towards certain side. Not all, obviously, this doesn't speak for all gay people, but you know, a lot of them are affected by like trauma and by like a history of dehumanization, which I think really affects like how you live, like everything in every aspect of your life. So I think it's like hard to like it's not like LGBT people are not on like the same level as like straight people when you talk about morality and like how that shapes us and how like our sexuality connects to our morals and how that shapes us, because like it's impossible for like a straight person to like have that same like that history of trauma that like does affect you. And you know, you know, that's different in some communities where you know, some women aren't able to, you know, like be sexual or control their sexuality as well. But even then, that's like a totally different like history. So I think it's tough to like kind of compare when the experiences are like, it's impossible for certain groups to experience the same thing.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, let's talk about a related issue here with respect to religion morality. By the way, I want to drop a term he uses. He talks about brights on page 279 to 80. Who are the brights? Who are these brights that he refers to? Sunny?
It was a little confusing on what he meant, but I believe he means like atheists and agnostics, people who are willing to rationally question religion and morality.
Good. Good. Yep, I think you're right. I just want that out there so you all know, so you see it on your radar. Let's talk about this issue on page 284 related to this idea of fanaticism in religion. And he says that this quote here in the middle of 284, he says, "Here is a morally relevant question well worth careful empirical investigation. Can a secular armed force, motivated in the main by a love of liberty or democracy not of God, maintain its credibility and hence its effectiveness with a minimum of bloodshed against an army of fanatics?" Secular army versus army of fanatics. Who wins? I should have made another poll. Who wins the fight, the showdown, the secular believe in humanity versus the fanatics, Rebecca?
Okay, I'm trying to remember what I wrote in my discussion post, but I think I basically said that the religious fanatics would win simply because if these people believe that they're fighting for like their religious cause, it's kind of like what you said earlier about a license to kill. To them, it doesn't really, like, the bloodshed is irrelevant if they're able to accomplish their goal, which is like winning out in their ideas. Whereas the secular army might try and think more about the bigger picture. Like, do we really want to kill all these people? Like, they just have different ideas than us, blah, 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 blah. They're not necessarily trying to push like an agenda. I mean, unless they were like really strong about like eradicating religion, but I feel like they still wouldn't have that same feeling that like, well, God told me that it was fine if I killed all these people because they're trying to destroy him. And I think there are, I don't remember this exactly because I haven't read the Bible in a hot minute, but I feel like there's examples of this in the Bible where like God basically will allow his armies to like kill a bunch of people to like push their agenda. So I feel like that would make them able to win out.
Win out. Chris, thank you. Chris. Chris, you're on mute.
Yeah, agreeing with Rebecca, it's kind of like, you know, like this thing where it's like they believe they're out here like delivering God's punishment, as opposed to like a more secular army who are like, you know, like are more based on very concrete or more like present things relating to like, you know, the other, you know, man, you know, the other humans around them, as opposed to like trying to appease this higher power. So like you have one thing who's fighting for things like, you know, like liberty, democracy, love and all that. And then, you know, you have these other people who think like they'll be rewarded for this in a completely different realm.
And who are the opponents?
Wait, which ones?
Your opponent, for the fanatics, your opponents are what? The damned, right?
Yeah, because like, you know, they're
better.
They're dishing out, you know, divine punishment here.
Yeah, you can't be going into battle being like, those are human beings over there who love and have families and children, right? That can't go.
Yeah, it's like, oh, sorry to continue, but yeah, it's kind of like they're really able to dehumanize the other people because they think they have a reason for it. Like there's justification to do that. As opposed to like, you know, a more secular people who can look at the other side and say, well, that's still a human. Like, you know, like they're not like morally wrong or bad for fighting with me.
Good. Thank you. Em.
I wrote about this in my response, but there is, I remember I went to Catholic school growing up, and so we actually had a whole class dedicated to studying the catechism, which is just scriptural interpretation. And one of, there are sins called cardinal sins, which are like the worst of the worst, like you're definitely going to hell if you do them. But then there are also exceptions to cardinal sins. So obviously murder as a cardinal sin, one of the exceptions is war.
Yeah.
So the fact that that we have these exceptions, that we are giving people who possibly already have an inclination towards violence and religious-based extremism, we are then like giving them the justification that they need to think that it's okay. And so they don't really feel any remorse or feel like they're doing something wrong.
Awesome. Yeah, just war theory was articulated by St. Augustine at the very beginning, and that's essentially what you're talking about, which is just war theory has, of course, expanded beyond just religious domain, but it was originally a way to I mean, the gospel is pretty clear, right? You are supposed to love your friends, and you're also supposed to love your enemies. It's, it says it. So the church and the powers that be had a problem a few centuries after that. They had to figure out how they were going to kill people. So they come up with just war theory, which has been taken up by many different traditions. So thank you, Irish.
I also agree with what Rebecca, Chris, and said, that definitely I feel like the army of fanatics will win, because not only they have the thing where like they're doing the will of God, but like as Dawkins also mentioned last time, where like they believe that they are promised a paradise, so they are like they're not scared of death, so they will go out and kill everyone for the sake of God.
Yeah. Good. So if you're going to go to war, it's better to have believers on your side than skeptical humanists, right? Here's a quote. I forget who said this, which general. There are no atheists in foxholes. That was a US general. He said that, but I remember that quote about 10 years ago. There are no atheists in foxholes. I think it's a little bit of a different angle. So I don't know. Wonder what you guys make of that one. Chris, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, I mean, you just said.
Jesus.
You just said the quote, but on. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Page 284. Stop. Anyways, on page 284, where that's the quote you said, but I think actually farther down the page where can you stop, please? Where he says, perpetuating the fatal downward spiral of righteous war. Fought by misguided young people sent into dubious battle by leaders who don't really believe the myths that sustain those who are risking their lives. I think that kind of encapsulates what we're talking about here. Of like, you have these people sent to die by people who don't even like believe what they're telling them.
Well, the way that I have interpreted there are no atheists in foxholes. The reason I interpret that is because God damn, if I find myself in a rut, I've had these thoughts lately. My children, my oldest is just about your age now. And I had a thought the other day, boy, if this were the 1940s and the 1910s, my son would be a soldier, and he might be eviscerated on the front lines or in the, it's awful to think about. War is an awful proposition that you guys are lucky that you don't have to think about that proposition. You really don't. Just imagine, what would it take to march off to war? My first thought is, yeah, I'd be praying incessantly because I don't want to die. Why is it also appealing? The idea that there are no atheists in foxholes also makes sense to me, because you don't want to think that you're marching off into a senseless war. The general who said that, he actually said it during the Iraq War 15 years ago. And I remember at the time, my comment on that was, well, the soldiers are marching off to fight for oil, but you can't tell them that, right? You can't tell them they're fighting for oil. You got to tell them they're fighting for God. Otherwise, it's just cruel, right? If you're going to go to war, son, you, or now daughter, you are going to fight for a righteous cause, right? The original name, I don't know if you know this, guys, but the United States has a tradition of naming wars, right? Iraqi freedom, Operation, I can't remember. They always have a name. The war in Afghanistan was initially called Operation Infinite Justice. And then they're like, yeah, they scrapped it. But you see the thinking, like, how do you justify getting your troops to fight? You can't. I'm going to get a little devious now. I'm going to point out that the Europeans, who are very sensible, secular humanists, I don't see their armies running around the world for good or bad. When we get involved in police action in the United States, it's often criticized, and often justly so. On the other hand, sometimes it's called for. Anyway, I'm getting a little too devious here. Let's see what Rebecca has to say.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts about the military. And I know you mentioned too, like, that our generation doesn't have to think about war as much. And I do think that is true to a degree if you live in America.
Yeah.
But I do also know that in Israel and Egypt, at least men are drafted, I think by the time they turn 18, unless they go to college. At least that's the case for my boyfriend. He's from Egypt, and the only reason he escaped the draft is because he came here. Yeah. So there are some people that are required to fight in wars. And I would also argue that right now the US does kind of have I call it like a sneaky draft, where, like, they're not really drafting you, but they're really going to encourage you to join the military because there's a lot of financial incentive, like student loan forgiveness. And they know that student loans kind of hang over the heads of most young people. And I think they give a lot of other, like, incentives for you to do it. And they know that desperate people will go do that because they don't have much of a choice. Right. So I think there is also, like, more at play than just religion or nationalism, although that definitely is part of it. Some people genuinely don't have a choice, like, whether or not they join the military.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm actually in favor of a draft. I think everybody should serve. And I hate to say that because I don't want my own sons to serve, but I think if you're gonna, but anyway, that's a different issue. Chris, go for it.
Oh, yeah, I wrote about it a bit in my response, but it's like, I feel like, like when we talk about fanaticism, we talk a lot, like, in terms of religion, but I feel like that's also something that is seen, especially within the US Army and its propaganda, where it's like, after 9/11, and then we weren't saying we're going there for oil. We're saying we're going there because there's terrorists and we need to free the Middle East. Or it's like, even back in, like, Vietnam, and, like, you had, like, these, like, these little 18, 19-year-old boys, like teenage boys out here, and they're being
your age people.
Yeah. And it's like they're being told, like, you know, like these generals, these higher ups, like, you're here for a reason and all this, and like, we're gonna win this soon. And it's like, you know, I guess, like, you know, because like those are still like, you know, real like individual people talking to you. But like when you have that sort of like power dynamic and power, like, you know, difference, and like you have like these young boys looking up to these older, you know, officials, basically almost like a god figure. And it's like, it's really terrifying. Especially if you ever like watch those like interviews of like veterans coming home from these wars, and they talk about how it's almost like cult-like once you're in there. And like, you know, the amount of like human rights abuses and war crimes that go on because of it. Because like, even though they aren't doing it for a god, there's still like that feeling of, you know, like a much higher power telling you to do it.
Well, you're called to do awful things, you know. I mean, you have to kill. And it's not easy to kill people if you think they're humans. Right? I think it's only fair in a weird way, you know, for people to think otherwise. Brittany, you had your hand up. Did you want to?
Oh, I was gonna say something, but the conversation has kind of progressed past that, so it's not relevant anymore.
No worries. Okay. Natan?
Yeah, this is just like about that war and like the draft.
Yeah.
So in Israel, it is drafted every boy and girl need to serve 3 years, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way like around it. Like my mom got away, like she like did studies, whatever. But like this could be off topic, but like in Israel, it's a sign of pride and like what's it called? Like a passage of like adulthood.
Yes.
Like my cousin, he moved to Israel and he wanted to join the army because even if you don't join the army, people like look at you like, wow, you didn't serve. Are you even like Israeli? So there is like a lot of natural pride to it, and like, but yeah.
Well, I mean, think about, you know, part of the discussion we've had here is like, you can't go to battle for something like oil. You know, you need something on the order of a metaphysical goal. And the Israeli army has it, right? It's the safety of the state of Israel. You know, that's as close to an existential goal as you get. Of course, the United States has a recurring tradition of, I mean, every country that goes to war, they will translate it in existential terms, right? You have to. You have to. That's just the way it goes for the reasons we've been discussing. Zach.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I have a similar experience to Natan, but like my uncle, he was born on the east coast of the U.S., like around you know, New York State, and he moved at one point in his life. I'm Jewish, my whole family is Jewish, and he at one point in his life decided to move to Israel. And he lived there for about like 10 years, and he also decided to serve because there was like social pressure for him living in Israel, even being an American living in Israel. He felt like a bit of a because he was living there for like such a long period of time. So he decided to serve. Yeah, so that's kind of like an interesting pressure and association between Israel and like military service or Israeli citizenship.
Good. On a related note, I see that Rebecca mentions in the quote, you know, how nationalism is what they use and religion isn't an option. A lot of philosophers have noted have noticed that we see a resurgence in nationalism now as secularism, as societies become more secular. So in Europe, which is extremely secular, you see nationalism on the rise. You know, people are and actually increasingly you see right-wing nationalism too. Yeah, religion and nationalism have always been intertwined, but nationalism is a handy substitute. You know, you will fight for your country, you know, you'll fight for your people, you know, that kind of a thing. That can be a very useful rallying cry. Oh, Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, like when you brought up the draft, and it's like, I mean, I don't support it, but I can kind of understand because like when you have people like, like in danger of being sent off somewhere else to fight and like possibly die, it definitely become a lot more involved with what's happening around them.
Yeah.
Like, like ever since the cancellation of the draft, like, I think Rebecca mentioned it, like this sort of silent draft where it's like now, these Army recruiters can like go and like target specifically like, like non-white or like lower income families, while white suburban people live in relative peace.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like when you think of the promises that like these Army recruiters like give to like, these young teenagers. And it's kind of like, how is that different from like, religious extremists being like, when you die, you'll get like surrounded by virgins and you'll have like feasts and everything. Where it's like, I mean, it seems a bit more concrete of like, you can travel the world and all this and all that, but then you come home with PTSD.
Yeah, they tell you you'll get a job, right? That's what ROTC does. Yeah, I'm not pro-war. Let me be clear. I'm a peacenik. I think that we need a draft because this country for too long has been able to shirk its military identity. One thing Chris mentions is true. Like we got rid of the draft in the 1970s, and then all of a sudden, voting participation in your demographic plummeted, which is not cool. Why don't young people vote? I don't know. If you had to go to war, I think you might vote. That was the spirit. Ask your parents. That was the spirit in Vietnam. I like to tell this story to my students. My first job was at Boston College, and an old timer there told me in 1970, tuition went up to $1,000. And so the students got up and marched out. They went on strike. So that should be mind-boggling for a variety of reasons. One reason, it was a fucking $1,000, and now it's like 16. We're like, yawn. Why were they going on strike? Because if you didn't go to college, you were in Vietnam. And so the voting participation of the youth was much higher then. Nowadays, and the other issue that Chris mentions, like our military is disproportionately brown-skinned people from lower income families, and that's not cool. Everybody needs to have skin in the game. Everybody. I also think we should go to war because we have all these fucking guns, and if you're going to have guns, you better know what they're for, and you better know what the implications are. And I don't believe it. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also like this thing of like when you have a choice and you choose to do something, like especially when we have like this thing of like, individual like consequence, it's like it's really hard to like step away from something when you have a choice. Then you had to choose to believe it and you choose to go into it. It's like, a regular draft where it's like you didn't choose to do that, you got selected. And it's like, so then like when you choose to go into the Army now, it's because you choose to believe what they told you. And it's hard to like, like
I don't know, Chris, be careful. I think it's probably because, you're going to get a job and a college education, right? Isn't that, don't you think?
Yeah, but you choose to believe it.
I recently read, I read an article, I think it was a column in the New Yorker like a year ago or 2 years ago, about the Trumpsters and like why, there's so much cynicism in Trump America. They don't believe in government, The one institution that they believe in is the military. Right? The military, I'm sure in our Micah bubble, it's easy to look at it with some doubt and skepticism, but for many Americans, it is an honorable institution. And more importantly, it's a way out, or it's not a way out, but it's a way to a middle-class lifestyle. And like, you can get yourself a technical job and things like that, I don't know how much belief there is there. I really don't. I don't know at all. I imagine there's plenty of indoctrination that comes along the way, Chris. I really do. But I'd be careful about talk about the indoctrination going in. I don't know. Listen, Chris, if you're African-American in this country and there are a lot in the military, we know that they have good reason to be dubious about this nation's credentials. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you ask many African-Americans, they're purely instrumental about joining. That's my opinion, but I think I'm right. Anyway, Aiden.
The issue I have with the draft is that, like, even if you think, okay, now more people will get involved and more people will know, but like they're not learning anything other than like, okay, this is something I have to participate in. It's like we're not going to be told anything. We're not guaranteed to be told anything more than we are now by the military, what we're fighting for, or like the benefits of going into the military. And there's absolutely no guarantee after that you're going to have a job or that you're going to make money. I mean, like, growing up in a big city, I know that like half the people living on the street are veterans. I mean, like, if this was something guaranteed before, it's definitely not guaranteed now.
Well, you can get a college education, Aiden. You can do ROTC.
Can you, if you come out of the military with extreme mental illness, PTSD, like physical disability, like, I mean, the more that it takes way more than it allows to give you, and not even guaranteed.
Good point, Aiden. You know what just occurred to me, everybody, and I was thinking about this relation, fits with what Chris was saying. You know, I don't know about the indoctrination going in, but there are concerns about the indoctrination coming out. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's been some big stories about the insurrectionists in the Capitol on January 6th. A good portion of them, a shockingly high portion of them, were from the military, were military veterans, you know. Arthur?
You mentioned like how the military is a way for people to like move up in the class system, and I think that's fucked up because like people deserve just a right to education and good living places. They shouldn't have to put their lives on the line potentially and risk like ruining their life, like Aiden mentioned, with like crippling disabilities, just to get access to something that's a bunch of people decided should be really expensive. You know, like the class, like I read like the class difference now is like bigger in America than it was during like the French Revolution. Like I don't think people should have to fight for causes they don't believe in or just because they need to get out of a bad situation. I think if they want to fight, they should want to fight.
Well,
and it's like not fair to just bar them from that, from like basic rights.
Let me paint a picture for you, Arthur. You know, like if you're lower middle class white from Trump land, you know, and you don't, what are your job prospects, you know, service industry, and there's no industrial jobs, you know. I mean, back in the day here in Baltimore, you could at the age of 18, you could walk into a job at Bethlehem Steel, you know, $40 an hour and retire at the age of 50 with a full pension. You know, that's gone now, right? So you can work at Walmart for, I don't know, what, $10 an hour as a greeter.
That's what I'm saying. Like our system is just made in a way that it doesn't allow people to like have flexibility and like forces people to like go to extreme measures just for like housing and like, you know, to get a job.
And
Thank you.
the solution is not the military either. It's to like put that money toward education. It's not like, oh, but maybe if they go into the military, they'll learn, or if they go into the military, they'll come out better. It's like, that's not the solution. I mean, to like poverty, like you can't just be like, oh, if you go to the military, it'll all be fine. That's an option. Why aren't you taking it?
I agree with you, Aiden. The amount we spend on our, you know, when you get to Congress, you look at congressmen who are fighting over where to spend money. You know, Democrats want to spend on education. Republicans want to spend on, you know, criminal justice. You know where they always agree? Military. They always agree on military spending because of jobs, right? The jobs, like in New Hampshire, we make planes here. In Texas, we make boats, and you know, we got to protect our jobs. You know, my point is that the United States is kind of like, I think it's actually kind of easy to forget the kind of military state we live in. You know, I was watching the Super Bowl last month, and they open up with a military brigade and honoring veterans and blah blah. Everything is military. I mean, we're engaged in the longest. We might be exiting the longest military incursion in this country's history. Do you know what that is? What is the longest war in U.S. history?
Is it in Iraq?
No, you're close. It's the war in Afghanistan. We've been there for now 20 years. And people forget about it. How can we be engaged in a war we forget about? How can we be in a war that your generation gets to forget about it, right? Your generation is able to forget about it. You're able to forget about it because you're not drafted. That's very strange, Finn.
Oh, I was just gonna point out, just like how nationalistic it all is, because I don't know if someone else, my internet's been kind of bad. I don't know if someone else pointed this out, but the American pledge, where we have to stand up in the morning and say things like that. And in Texas, I know we have to say the Texas pledge.
Oh,
we gotta say two. We have to honor, or we have to basically just talk about how proud we are to be American, and just how wonderful it is every damn day. Even I went to a liberal school in the city in Dallas, because I was like, you know what, I'm sick of getting death threats in the middle of nowhere. I'm gonna go to Dallas about it. Even there, I had teachers that said, you better stand up for this. And I was like, I got shit to do. I'm sitting here. I listen, my feet hurt. I don't want to do this. But it's just things like that. And then all of the casual propaganda, military propaganda that is just ever present. It's just how could you not think that it's so sad to me. It's so sad to me. I watched Cadet Kelly the other day, and I said, oh my God, even Hillary Duff did this to me. I couldn't even escape with Lizzie McGuire. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, even those class traitors in Paw Patrol. I think that it's just starting kids off at such a young age, and it's I trust Olivia Benson from Law and Order SVU, but I have an ACAB sticker on my car. What's the truth? I try to be a problem here. Rednecks always tailgate me, and I'm always like, why are you tailgating me? Then I remember I have their nightmare of a car. I have a sticker that says protected by Edward Cullen. I have a few Bigfoot stickers, and then the rest are just gay stickers. And I'm probably such a problem to you. Anyway, yeah, no, I'm just so gagged about that. Just military propaganda everywhere. And also just in any place, what Natan was saying, in Israel, and what Rebecca was saying in Egypt, it's just especially in places where there are these mandatory drafts and these mandatory things, it's literally the second you're born. And I'm just gagged. Anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you all keep, pointing to the close relation between nationalism, patriotism, and religion. And they do go hand in hand. I've often noticed that European visitors, what do they notice about Americans? They notice that we are very religious, and they notice that we are very patriotic. I remember reading about this French writer. He noticed as soon, he's like, why do you have flags everywhere in your country? I know where I am. What's someone with all the flags, you got to have a flag on every door. I know this is America. It's a little weird, we're deeply patriotic and religious at the same time, curious thing, we also, United States, religion and patriotism actually go hand in hand where they don't in Europe. God bless America. Remember, the president, when he says the State of the Union address, is going to have to say, and God bless the United States, right? Speaking of bumper stickers, my dad had a bumper sticker that said, God bless every country, no exceptions, because he was so mad about God Bless America. And he lives up in Trump land. So like you've been, they weren't happy with him. And he drove a Japanese truck. I mean, Jesus Christ.
The worst sticker I have that I think that nobody likes, it's this like picture of like, it's like a silhouette of this like hot lady. And it says, if you're gonna ride my ass, at least pull my hair. And that is my favorite bumper sticker of all time.
I have seen that. That sounds like a Texas one.
Yes.
I love it.
Or if like, I wanna get bumper stickers that are in like the conservative Republican format, but they say things that are like really like liberal. So they're saying like, if you disrespect this flag, you can get the hell out of my country. But it's like the trans flag or something. I want that. Good.
I think I hear a senior project coming. I'm going to see it in the gateway. All right, listen, guys, I just realized what time it is, so I better let you all go. Okay. This was good today. This was kind of free ranging all over the place. I had something rather logical and orderly prepared, but this was much better. So next week, I'll make sure that we nail the big stuff, but we did a lot of interesting things today. This was really good. And so I'm gonna let you go, fly away, do your papers, talk to me. Okay. Hey, if you're interested in all this military industrial bullshit, blah, blah, read my stuff on guns and take my political theory class. Anyway, I'll see you all next week. Okay. I'm going to stick around. Anybody wants to talk about their papers?
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Furman. Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Not exactly about papers, but like all this class reminds me of like way back when I was in oh my god, what was it? Democracy, Age of Democracy? I don't know. But it was like I remember saying like, oh, isn't it like, you know, like isn't it patriotic to want to question it? And you're like, I don't know, most patriots wouldn't say that. And I've had that stuck in my brain for the past 2 years, Furman.
There you go.
2 years. I haven't even been in school.
Nice.
Whenever I'm in this class, I'm just like transported back to being 19 years old and crazy.
Okay. You're so crazy. Your dog's crazier.
Yeah, he's a baby though. I'm not a baby. I can drink legally.
You want to ask about your paper?
Oh, no, I might later this week.
Cool. Email me.
Yeah.
Hello, Brittany.
Hello. I just wanted to chat about paper topics.
Do it.
Because I wasn't planning on going with one of the ones that was like provided by you as an option, so I don't have to clear it with you first.
No problem.
I wasn't actually sure what I was going to do until this class, and this idea of like war, religion as a justification for war seems like an interesting avenue that I feel like I could talk about. I would also, I don't know, I kind of like, I already know a lot about incarceration in the country too. But I don't know if there's a way that I can like connect those things.
Well, let me start here by just reminding you what I want you guys to accomplish with these first papers. With these first papers, I want this to be a rather close reading of the texts to make sure you're paying attention to the author and interpret them, you know, accurately and honestly. A lot of what you're talking about, you know, think about this for a final research issue, especially if you're going to get into the issue of incarceration. What I would, if you wanted to talk about war, I would like you to interpret his argument here in the latter part of this book, Dennett. I would like you to write about his argument in that chapter on morality, right?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking Dennett because.
And if you zero in on him, just like interpret his argument for me. I think that would be doable here. And then that's your platform or foundation for later work when, or if you want to expand it into a research project, right? Then you have Dennett's commentary for that. You got it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Sounds okay.
I think we're reading the latter half of Dennett this week.
No. This was your reading. It was.
Oh, that was
next week. Your papers are due.
Oh, I thought that we read the first half. Okay, I was like,
no, I had you read 2 chapters in Dennett. I had you read the chapter Belief and Morality and Religion, and the second one, Morality and Religion, is where he talks about war.
Okay,
and so that's the one I'd like you to comment on. Chapter 10. Sorry,
I thought it was
78.
Okay, my bad. I thought it was more linear. I thought we were doing like first half, second half. I
No,
didn't know
no.
if we had like, okay, cool. That works. That makes me feel better because I've already read it.
You should have. Okay. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, sounds good to me. If I have any other questions, I will email you during the week, but otherwise I will just proceed with this route.
Thank you. Sounds good. See you later. All right. Anybody else? Hello.
Oh, hi, Formin.
How you doing?
I from like 2 weeks ago, like